Okay, hello there and welcome to another revision video. This time our topic is the Nazi rise to power, and our key question is, did the Great Depression cause Hitler to become the Chancellor of Germany? So we start off here with the timeline of some of the key events in the Nazi rise to power. Of course, the story starts way before 1929 with Hitler joining the German Workers' Party, taking that over, winning a power struggle with Anton Drexler in 1920. Obviously, there was the failed Munich beer hall putsch in November 1923, for which Hitler was sent to prison for 5 years. In 1924, remember, he used his trial as a great propaganda exercise. He was sent to prison for 5 years, only served 9 months. During that time, he wrote Mein Kampf, and of course, he changed tactics and decided that he wanted to try and win power by legal methods and campaign for votes, but that wasn't particularly successful. In the 1928 election, the Nazis won just 12 seats. However, by the 30th of January 1933, President Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as the Chancellor of Germany, and of course the rest is history. So some timeline of key events. First off, the Wall Street crash is a very significant event in all this, leading to the collapse of the Weimar Republic and helps the Nazis to start to build their power base. We also have the election in September 1930, which is really crucial. Heinrich Brüning, who was the Chancellor, didn't have to call an election at that time, but he chose to, and this election was decisive because it very much changed the composition of the German Parliament, the Reichstag. The Nazis won 107 seats, which is a huge jump from the 12 seats they had in 1928. And then the depression in Germany just got worse with the German banking crisis, which took place in the summer of 1931. The collapse of one of Germany's main banks, the Danette Bank, led to a banking crisis which saw 5 banks go bust. And then throughout 1932, Adolf Hitler increased his personal profile, coming second in the presidential election, the second round of the presidential election in April 1932, which of course Hindenburg won. And in the July 1932 election, the Nazis won 230 seats and were the largest party in Germany. Now, you might have expected that that would have been the time where Hindenburg would have got in touch with Hitler and appointed him as Chancellor of Germany, but no, that was not the case. And one of the reasons for that is that Hindenburg never really trusted Hitler. And what's fascinating and what's very important as well for you to know about in any study of this topic is that in the November 1932 election, the Nazis were actually reduced to 196 seats. They lost 2 million votes, and therefore in any discussion about how Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, it's really important to know about what was going on behind the scenes and about the influence of Franz von Papen and how he persuaded Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor in January 1933. So our key question anyway that we're going to look at is, was it true that the Great Depression caused Hitler to become Chancellor of Germany? So we're going to take that as our key kind of factor, and we're going to look at some of the different factors around this key question in this session today. So we know about the Nazis in the 1920s, but we know also that the Nazis built some of their foundations in the 1920s. So quite a lot of the key strategies that the Nazis used, realising the importance of propaganda, the importance of public speaking. The Hitler Youth groups were established in the 1920s, but they were struggling. And I suppose one of the things that began to help the Nazis rise to power was their work with this man who was called Alfred Hugenberg. And the Nazis got quite a lot of publicity when they became involved with Hugenberg over a campaign against the Young Plan in 1929. And this was very much right-wing forces coming together to campaign against that. Many people in Germany opposed the Young Plan and opposed Stresemann's policy of Erfüllungspolitik, which means fulfillment, which they thought was just caving into the Allies, and therefore Hitler and Hugenberg, who was the leader of the German Nationalist Party, the DNVP, were very much kind of coming together to oppose that. So that was the Nazis in the 1920s, but obviously everything changed with the Wall Street crash of October 1929. So this is a really important statistic for you to know about, and just to know the percentage that the Nazis were getting in these elections. We can see that the seats jumped from 12 then to 107 in the September 1930 election, July 1932 230 seats, and then that dip down to November 1932, 196, the loss of 2 million votes during that time. The March 1933 election wasn't a fair election, so it can't really be taken as strong historical evidence for how many people really supported the Nazis, but obviously they did increase their support and the number of votes. But obviously interesting that despite the fact Hitler was Chancellor during that time, and despite the intimidation that there was during that March 1933 election, still a majority of German people did not vote for the Nazis in the March 1933 election. So the Great Depression, well, the Great Depression, there's a nice source there that you can pause and read. It's important to have some key statistics about the impact of the Great Depression. So once the Wall Street crash happened on the 24th of October 1929, the Americans gave Germany 90 days to begin to pay back the loans. Unemployment peaked at around 6 million. We talked about the banking crisis before, but some nice stats to remember. 1 in 3 people in Germany unemployed at the start of 1933. Export values fell by 55%. 50,000 businesses go bankrupt. 39% drop in national income between 1929 and 1932. So it had a really bad impact, but obviously you've got to think, well, many of these people might have gone on to support the communists, and of course we know that the communists increased their seats by 1932 up to 100 seats. So why did people vote for the Nazis? Well, remember the importance of the propaganda of the Nazis. They offered people work and bread. And a lot of people invested in Hitler for his strong leadership. And if you think about some of the posters, the Our Last Hope poster, these are all important factors about how the Nazis capitalized on the economic depression in order to win support. But I think one of the really significant consequences of the Great Depression was the complete collapse of Weimar democracy during this time. And that was really, really important, because I suppose what the Great Depression showed is the Weimar Republic was no longer working. It was no longer functioning properly. And we can see that if we look at a little bit more evidence about that. So there's a nice statistic about unemployment during this time. It's important to understand the significance of unemployment in Germany during this time. And also important to know that Germany avoided doing things like printing money or spending any more money, which might have in the short term helped combat unemployment, because obviously of what the memory of hyperinflation in Germany in 1923. So the impact of the Great Depression was that it essentially led to a collapse in democracy, and we can see there some really nice statistics about how the use of the Presidential Decree Laws, Article 48, increased to being used 66 times in 1932. Laws passed by the Reichstag dropped massively, and the days the Reichstag met. So I would put forward an argument that Weimar democracy collapsed before Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and that already when Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany on the 30th of January 1933, democracy and the way that the Weimar Republic was functioning had already collapsed. And I think there's some really strong evidence there to support that in those statistics you can see there at the bottom. So here's also, sometimes people get confused about the different governments, so you can look at these statistics and these facts just to see who was in charge of Germany during this time. It's actually Hermann Müller and his Grand Coalition government that was initially in charge, but that collapsed and fell to Brüning. And just look at the percentage of deputies actually supporting the government during this time. So there's really no support for the Weimar Republic from the people that are being elected during that time. And of course, that's what's very significant about the September 1930 election. So why people vote for the Nazis? Well, firstly, you've got the appeal of Adolf Hitler. You've got his speeches that could transform people and persuade people to support and vote for him. There's a poster there on the left-hand side for when he stood to be president in 1932. The Nazi rallies, the fact he travelled around by plane, the fact that I suppose he projected himself as the strong leader that many people in Germany felt was lacking in Germany. There was an element, I think, in Germany at that time of harking back to the days of the Kaiser, and about how Germany had never been so weak when the Kaiser was in charge. And I suppose that's the kind of leader that Hitler was presenting himself as, always smartly dressed in military uniform, very much presenting himself as a saviour figure. If you think about those posters, the Our Last Hope poster, that was very much the image that people were trying to project of Hitler during this time. So you can see there the propaganda posters that I've talked about. The message on the right-hand side with the red poster means in German, means in English, the German phrase Arbeit und Brot, which means work and bread. And Unser letzte Hoffnung on the left-hand side, our last hope. And you've got these faces of unemployed people who are desperate, they're starving, perhaps homeless, lost their jobs. They're looking for somebody to save them. And I think that's one of the reasons why people vote for the Nazis. The Nazis were very much a catch-all party, and they appealed to lots of different groups and classes within Germany during this time. You've also got the role of industrialists. So you've got industrialists, big business people, people like the DNVP leader Alfred Hugenberg, who was also a media tycoon during this time. You've got an example of somebody like a rich industrialist like Fritz Thyssen, who gave money to the Nazis in the early 1930s. The Nazis were seen, I suppose, by people who were on the right wing of German politics at the time. The Nazis were seen as the best hope of destroying communism. And you can see those statistics on the right-hand side of the steady increase in support for the communists, so that by the November 1932 election, they had 100 seats. The fact that Nazis and the SA, the brown shirts, fought street battles against the communists meant that many people thought the Nazis were the best opportunity of destroying communism in Germany, ensuring that it didn't gain a foothold. And therefore, many people in big business and many rich people in Germany voted for the Nazis, not particularly because they necessarily supported everything they stood for, but they thought that it was the best opportunity to get rid and destroy communism in Germany. So another factor, the role of Franz von Papen. You can see there two people that are very significant in Hitler's rise to power. Brüning resigned as Chancellor in May 1932. He was replaced by Franz von Papen as Chancellor, but he really couldn't get any support from the Reichstag whatsoever. It's one of the reasons why another election was called in November 1932. Papen lost his place as Chancellor. Hindenburg appointed the military general Kurt von Schleicher, as you can see there, as Chancellor. Now, Kurt von Schleicher's solution was to suspend the constitution, set up a military dictatorship in Germany. Now, during that time, towards the end of 1932, in the winter of 1932 into 1933, there were street battles that were going on in Germany between the communists and the Nazis, and it very much seemed as though there was chaos on the streets. Germany was perhaps heading for a lack of order, riots, perhaps even some kind of civil war. And it was within this climate that Franz von Papen persuaded Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor, saying that Hitler needed to be brought into the government so that they could somehow control him. And Hitler was very much underestimated as a politician at that time. There was a belief that if Hitler was brought in, that he could somehow be controlled, and he was better sort of inside the tent, if you like, than outside. And that was certainly the idea of Franz von Papen, and he worked hard to persuade Hindenburg, who had been very reluctant to appoint Hitler as Chancellor. So Hitler was appointed Chancellor, and I think that's a very significant thing for you to analyse, to be aware of the role of Franz von Papen, and the fact that really what we're seeing now is that Weimar democracy had completely collapsed. And really the choice was between some kind of military dictatorship under someone like von Schleicher, a military general, or trying to get Hitler involved. And this is what von Papen told Hindenburg. They had Hitler in his pocket, and that, quote, within 2 months we will have pushed Hitler so far into a corner that he'll squeak. And of course that was a huge misjudgment, and of course that never actually happened. But obviously this is a really important factor to be aware of, the role of Franz von Papen in Hitler becoming Chancellor. So these are some of the main factors for you to be aware of, and the main reasons for why Hitler became Chancellor. So it's a good idea in any kind of question that will come up on this, for you to have some key evidence for all of these different factors: the Great Depression, Hitler's leadership, the fact that he made speeches, his image, strong leader, the propaganda of the working bread, the violence of the SA, intimidated people to support the Nazis, made the Nazis look as though they were tough on communism. The collapse of the Weimar Republic, the support of rich industrialists like Fritz Thyssen, fear of communism, that's very much a link to that one, and of course the role of Franz von Papen and Hindenburg in eventually appointing him Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any questions, then do let me know. But that was a revision video on the Nazi rise to power. Thank you.